Have you ever stopped to really think about the fact that magic in fiction is usually just science that we haven't seen the user manual for yet?
That is a very specific way to look at it.
No, seriously. Think about it. If you took a microwave back to the 16th century, you'd be burned at the stake. You put a cold chicken in a box, press a button, and 2 minutes later it's steaming.
That's sorcery.
That is sorcery. But to us, it's just, exciting water molecules with waves. It's physics.
It brings to mind that Arthur C. Clarke quote, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic."
But we usually apply that to sci-fi, right? Aliens and spaceships.
Exactly. We rarely apply it to fantasy monsters. And that is why I'm so hyped for today's deep dive. We are going back to Beacon Hills. We are talking about the Teen Wolf universe.
But not just a recap.
No. We are looking at a theory that claims the magic in Teen Wolf is actually a hard science system. We're talking biophysics and voltage.
It's a fascinating angle. Specifically, we're dissecting the werewolf spark. I mean, in most lore, being a werewolf is a curse or a virus.
Right.
But the theory we're looking at today suggests the spark is a form of tangible, measurable energy, specifically divine electricity.
Divine electricity. It sounds like an indie rock album. But to guide us, we are looking at a theory developed by the YouTube channel Teen Wolf News. And I have to say, looking at the notes from Teen Wolf News, this wasn't just some random thought.
No, the creator was in what they called a serious brain phase. I love that term. It's that state where you pull on one little thread, in this case druids, and suddenly you've unraveled the entire metaphysical fabric of the show.
We have all been there.
So here's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore the theory from Teen Wolf News that the spark is a literal electrical current. We'll trace it back to Zeus.
Yes, that's Zeus.
Explain how it makes sense of the creepy mind control stuff from Season 1, break down the physics of the true alpha, and finally, look at the dark, almost economic model of the villain Deucalion.
It is a roadmap that takes us from Greek mythology to, modern circuit theory.
So let's unpack this. We have to start at the beginning. The origin story. I think a lot of casual fans just assume the werewolf thing is ancient, vague magic.
But Teen Wolf News points to a very specific, inciting incident.
Which is?
The theory anchors everything in the myth of King Lycaon. And this is actual Greek mythology, by the way, not just show lore. Lycaon tried to trick Zeus into eating human flesh.
Which historically is a terrible idea.
A terrible idea. Never prank a Greek god. So Zeus gets angry, but he doesn't just curse them verbally. He doesn't just wave a wand. He zapped Lycaon and his sons with lightning.
Okay, so usually we interpret that as he struck them down, a smiting. But Teen Wolf News is arguing something more specific here, right?
Precisely. Teen Wolf News argues this wasn't just a lightning bolt that burned them, it was a divine energy transfer. You have to remember, Zeus is a literal god of energy. When that bolt hit, it didn't kill them. It irreversibly altered the bioelectricity of their bodies.
Okay, let's pause on bioelectricity for a second, because this is where we blend the myth with the science. We all have electricity in us, right?
We do. The human body is basically a battery. At rest, we produce roughly 100 watts of power. Our brains are just these crackling webs of electrical impulses.
So Teen Wolf News posits that Zeus's lightning didn't replace that system, it just supercharged it.
Or infused it with a touch of the divine. It's a permanent alteration of the body's natural current. It's like hooking a standard battery up to a nuclear reactor. The hardware is still biological blood, bone, tissue, but the energy running through it is now God tier.
That paints such a vivid image. It's not magic floating around them. It's high-voltage biology.
And this actually ties into the druids. The show always has druids hanging around werewolves, and it's never fully explained why they're so linked.
Right.
But Teen Wolf News makes the connection. Lycaon sought out the druids to turn him back to human.
He wanted the current turned off.
Exactly. But Teen Wolf News points out that the druids couldn't remove the Zeus lightning. That spark was fused to them, so all the druids could do was teach them to control the shift.
So he couldn't fix the battery, they just taught them how to manage the output.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So the spark is literally a remnant of a Greek god's lightning bolt flowing through the veins of every werewolf. That's heavy. It removes the poetry and makes it terrifyingly physical.
It does. And what's fascinating here is how this theory recontextualizes the bite.
Oh, absolutely. In this show, they always say the bite is a gift. And I always thought, that's just villain monologue stuff, rationalizing. But if we follow the theory laid out by Teen Wolf News, it's a literal gift.
It appears so. If the alpha spark is divine energy, then the bite acts like a circuit. Teen Wolf News suggests that when an alpha bites someone, they are physically transferring a tiny piece of that divine electrical charge into the victim.
So you're jump-starting their system with a piece of Zeus.
Exactly.
Oh.
And because the source of the energy is divine, it defies normal conservation laws in one specific way. The alpha doesn't run out of battery.
Well,
The original spark is so potent that passing it on doesn't diminish the alpha. However, the new werewolf, the beta, gets a slightly weaker version of that current.
which explains the hierarchy. The alpha is the generator. The betas are the devices running off the grid. And Teen Wolf News points out that this explains the eyes, right? The red eyes of an alpha.
Yes, Teen Wolf News describes the red eyes as the searing intensity of that pure, undiluted spark. Yellow or blue eyes just represent a lower voltage. It's not just a rank badge, it's a fuel gauge.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and a little bit creepy. We need to talk about the nervous system. Because if we accept the spark as electricity, and our brains run on electricity, that opens up some disturbing doors.
It does, and this is where Teen Wolf News really shines in explaining Season 1. Do you remember how Peter Hale, the alpha, seemed to be able to control Scott?
Yeah, it was super unsettling. He would, call him to the woods. He made Scott dream about killing his friends. I just thought it was psychological manipulation or something.
Well, Teen Wolf News argues it was much more literal, since Peter put a piece of his own spark, his own divine electricity, into Scott.
He effectively installed a receiver in Scott's head.
Whoa. Yes, that's it. He's not just whispering in his ear, he's dialing into his nervous system.
So the alpha literally owns a piece of the beta's nervous system.
And the red glow we saw in Scott's eyes during those moments, Teen Wolf News suggests that wasn't just Scott getting angry, that was Peter's spark flaring up and overriding Scott's own bioelectricity.
Hostile takeover.
Absolutely.
That makes the whole pack dynamic feel so much more visceral. And Teen Wolf News also mentions the memory transfer, right? The thing with the claws in the neck.
Right. We see werewolves stick claws into the back of someone's neck to share memories.
It's gross, let's be honest.
It is gross. But Teen Wolf News breaks this down beautifully. Memories are just a combination of electricity and chemicals. The werewolf spark allows for a direct interface. It's like plugging a USB drive directly into the brainstem.
It's biological hacking. I love it.
Yeah.
But let's look at the flip side of this. We've talked about giving this mark. What happens when an alpha dies or gives it up? Because there is a rule in physics, and Teen Wolf News quotes Deaton on this. Energy doesn't just disappear.
This is the law of conservation of energy applied to mythology. When an alpha is killed, that massive charge, the Zeus voltage, has to go somewhere.
So if another werewolf kills them, it's simple. The spark jumps.
Correct. The energy seeks the nearest compatible vessel, which is the killer. But if the death is accidental or caused by a human, the energy is discerning. It seeks the strongest familial link.
Which explains the Hale family passing the power down. But I want to talk about a specific case that Teen Wolf News highlights, which is Derek and Cora.
Ah, yes.
Because Derek didn't die, but he lost his alpha status to save his sister.
This is a perfect example of the theory in action. Derek was an alpha. His sister Cora was dying. And to save her, he had to pour everything he had into her.
So he didn't lose the spark into thin air.
No. According to Teen Wolf News, he poured his alpha-level energy into Cora to jumpstart her system. The result wasn't that the energy vanished. It was that the Hale spark was divided.
Oh, so instead of one alpha battery, you now have two half-charged batteries.
Exactly. They are both still werewolves. They both still have the spark, but neither holds enough of the voltage to be an alpha anymore. The concentration of the current was diluted between two bodies.
That makes so much sense. It explains why he didn't turn human, but just lost the red eyes. It's a volume issue.
Volume and intensity.
Okay, so we have a solid working theory here. Spark equals Zeus electricity. Bite equals transfer. But there is a massive anomaly in the system. His name is Scott McCall.
The true alpha.
Right. The whole point of Scott is that he didn't kill anyone to get his power. He didn't steal the voltage. So if the spark comes from Zeus or from stealing it, how does Scott exist? Is this a hole in the theory from Teen Wolf News?
You would think so, but Teen Wolf News actually refines the theory to accommodate this. And it's a really beautiful concept. Remember, every werewolf has a bit of the divine spark.
Right, even a beta.
The theory posits that if a werewolf is morally superior, benevolent, protecting others, deeply loved by their pack tribe, their own spirit begins to generate positive energy.
Like a self-charging battery.
In a way, think of the spark as a threshold. Usually, you need an external Zeus boost to hit alpha levels. But Scott's personal spiritual energy, his moral voltage, if you will, added to the spark he already had. He generated enough internal power to push the total voltage up.
So he ascended because his own soul filled the gap.
Precisely. And this explains something else that's very specific to Scott. Why can only his betas take his power?
Oh, right. In the show, they imply that a random werewolf can't just kill him and take it.
Teen Wolf News suggests this is because his spark is unique to his specific moral fingerprint. The Zeus spark is generic divine energy. Anyone can hold it. But Scott's alpha spark is a hybrid. It's part Zeus, part Scott. So it's incompatible with anyone he didn't share it with.
That is such a cool distinction. It makes the true alpha status feel less like plot armor and more like a different biological species almost.
It does. It shifts the power dynamic from conquest to cultivation.
Speaking of conquest, we have to talk about the opposite of Scott. The Dark Mirror, Deucalion.
The demon wolf.
This guy wanted to form a pack of only alphas. And Teen Wolf News uses a really interesting analogy for how he gained power. It wasn't just killing, it was economics.
Yes, the investment banking of power. This is one of the most chilling parts of the theory found in Teen Wolf News. Deucalion didn't just hunt random alphas. He gave power to his own betas.
He loaned them the spark.
He loaned them the capital. And as those betas lived their lives, fought battles, and grew stronger, they added their own life force and experiences to that spark. They grew the investment.
And then?
And then he killed them. But according to Teen Wolf News, he wasn't just taking back his original loan. He was taking the interest they had accrued. He absorbed their life force to supercharge himself.
That is incredibly dark. So he wasn't stronger just because he had more sparks. He was stronger because he was harvesting the lived experiences of his victims.
Correct. He was aggregating the spiritual energy of others to artificially inflate his own voltage. It's the exact opposite of Scott, who generated power from within.
You take until there's nothing more to give. That's the quote. It takes on a whole new meaning with this. It's parasitic.
It is. It frames the entire conflict of the show, not just as good versus evil, but as sustainable energy versus predatory consumption.
I love that. Sustainable energy versus predatory consumption. Who knew Teen Wolf was so socially conscious?
It's hidden in the text if you look for it.
Now, we're coming to the end of our roadmap, but in the spirit of a tree deep dive, we have to admit when a theory has a hole. And Teen Wolf News is very honest about this. There is one thing this divine electricity theory doesn't explain.
The beast of Gévaudan.
The beast, the original monster. In the lore, he didn't get bitten. He drank rainwater from a wolf's paw print.
And that is a hard left turn from divine electricity. Teen Wolf News admits that the theory hits a wall there. I mean, how does drinking rainwater transfer a spark?
Yeah, unless the water conducted electricity left in the footprint. But that's a stretch. That feels like we're reaching. Sometimes magic is just magic, I guess.
It's the exception that proves the rule. But for the vast majority of the modern werewolves in the show, the electrical theory holds up incredibly well.
It really does. So let's recap. We started with a YouTube video from Teen Wolf News and ended up redefining an entire fantasy ecosystem. The werewolf spark isn't just a metaphor. It is an ancient electrical current governed by the laws of physics.
Conservation of energy, voltage, circuitry, and the whims of Greek gods. It connects the pack physically and mentally. It explains control, memory sharing, power transfer. It turns the werewolf from a monster into a node in a divine network.
A node in a divine network. I'm stealing that. But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. This is something that kept nagging at me while reading through the Teen Wolf News source material.
Go on.
If this theory is true, if a piece of the alpha literally lives inside every beta they bite, if that electricity is constantly humming in their nervous system, are werewolves ever truly individual?
That is the question.
I mean, think about it. If your angry thoughts, your impulses, even your eye color, are dictated by a current that belongs to someone else, are you your own person? Or are you just a walking extension of your creator?
It challenges the concept of free will entirely. If the hardware of your brain is running on someone else's software, where do you begin and the alpha end?
Exactly. It makes Scott's struggle to be his own man even more heroic, doesn't it? He was fighting his own biology.
He was rewriting the code.
Well, on that existential crisis note, we are going to wrap things up. If you want to see the original breakdown, you absolutely have to check out the channel Teen Wolf News. They have a treasure trove of lore videos.
Definitely worth a watch. It's rare to find fan theories that are this scientifically grounded.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.
Stay curious.